Hi, everyone. My name is Sarah Thomas. I'm a professor at Bridgewater State University and a resident of Mattapoisett, Massachusetts. And welcome to our community read discussion about where do we go from here after reading How to Be an Anti-Racist or the book Stamped. We are so excited that all of you have joined us. I'm looking at everyone and it's very exciting. We have some wonderful speakers today who are going to talk to us about next steps. We have Rebecca Correia, who's going to actually be opening with a song. So thank you. We have Gail Fortes, the director of the YWCA Southeastern Massachusetts. Dr. Shanna Howell, the Dean of Bristol Community College, the New Bedford campus. Marlene Pollock, a retired professor of history from BUC and the co-founder of the Coalition for Social Justice, and Dr. Shirin Edwin, the Dean of Arts and Humanities at BCC. We are very excited to have all of you here. Because we are on Zoom, we'd ask that all of you please keep your mics muted unless while people are speaking. And if you do have a question, feel free to post it in the chat. And we will be having a Q&A at the end of everything, and we will answer those questions for you. So without further ado, let's see how we as a community can keep this the ball rolling and make some changes to make this world even better place than it already is. Thank you.
So my name is Rebecca. And
oh, sorry, Rebecca. Okay, that's me. I will introduce Rebecca.
Okay, you can introduce me. Go for it.
Hi, everybody. I'm the timekeeper, so you know you're in good hands. My name is Stacy Hess, and I'm a teacher at Bristol. I'm a longtime writer, and Mattapoisett is my hometown. So thank you for being here tonight. I just want you to know that everyone here is a volunteer, and it struck me a few minutes ago. I'm asking myself, why are we doing this? And we must be doing this for love, because no one's getting paid. We're taking time out of our evening and even away from our families. So thank you again for joining us tonight. So I have the pleasure of introducing Rebecca Correia, who some of you may know. She is no stranger to TriTown music fans. She's a singer-songwriter with over 200 songs in her career. She grew up in Rochester, attended the Hart School of Music, and then swiftly began performing in Boston, New York, Miami, and Los Angeles, among many other places. She's opened for Livingston Taylor, Sean Colvin, Javier Colon, and a host of other performers. Keb Mo produced Rebecca's most recent album called Grown Up Games, and you can find that on iTunes. She divides her time between Leapers Fork, Tennessee and Rochester, and Leapers Fork is right outside of Nashville. So please join me in welcoming the very generous-hearted, super talented, and a woman that I'm proud to call my friend, Rebecca Correia. And she's going to tell you a little bit about her song.
Thank you, Stacy. Appreciate it. I'm so glad to be here with you all. I know it's crazy times these days being online. I wish we could all be in a room together and be talking about this, but I'm sure that we will soon enough. In the meantime, this will have to do, as Stacy said, I am in Tennessee, the backwoods in the South. And I have lived here in this old cabin in the wintertime for the past 6 years, but I've been in Nashville for 13. So I've gotten a great taste of the South. And this song came out at the beginning of the summer after George Floyd's death. And it was basically that question that people ask, that statement that a lot of people make of all lives matter. And I said, well, if all lives matter, then prove it, give it out now. If we all deserve love, then give it out now. So that's the message in this song. And it's It's called Give It Out Now. Why is it so hard to admit that we're wrong and say that we're sorry and change? What will it take for the highest of all stakes for all to come tumbling down? If we all deserve love, then why don't we give it out now? With a heart wide open, broken only to find our common ground. It's an urgent request for the final conquest to put the fire out. If we all deserve love, then give it out now. Ooh. So I'll move onward with love and give it everything I've got. Set my soul free, 'cause we're all chasing a dream, if you know what I mean. Make room for every heart and dream on, dreamers, yes. Believe on, believers, with a heart wide open, broken only to find our solid ground. It's an ancient message, a secret blessing, a time to shout it out. If we all deserve love, then give it out now. 'Cause this is an SOS. Give it your very best. Give it everything you got. Give it love and go on and give it now. Don't miss the lesson, yes. 'Cause when you give, you get. And how quickly we forget that forgiveness is the answer. The way to pass this test. It is the only road. Time to save our souls. Give it out. 'Cause I'm 39 years old and little did I know this would be a memory my heart would always hold. And if I knew then what I know now, I would have said it out loud. Shout it to the treetops, past the edges of this town, that I love you. I love you. I always will. I am honored and I am thankful. Hey, so blessed to be here beside you. And there's no place that I would rather be. I remember this day forever. I remember this day forever. I remember this day forever in my memory. Don't miss the yes and yes.
We have to unmute.
Thank you.
That was so beautiful.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Rebecca. We were honored to hear you play. And so to introduce myself, my name is Jordan Latham, and I'm the Director of Advocacy and Resource Development at YWCA Southeastern Massachusetts, where we're on a mission to eliminate racism, empower women, and promote peace, justice, freedom, and dignity for all. I am a newish resident to Rochester, originally hailing from New Bedford, and I have the distinct privilege of introducing my boss, my friend, and my mentor, Ms. Gail Fortes. Gail has served as the Executive Director of the YWCA since September 2006. Gail has served the YW in numerous capacities since January 1994. She earned her bachelor's in physical education and her master's in public administration from Bridgewater State University, a college we will hear a lot from tonight. Gail is truly committed to the YW's mission of eliminating racism and empowering women. She is the 2015 Standard Times New Bedford Woman of the Year and a 2016 Unsung Heroine for the Massachusetts Commission on the Status of Women. She is also the immediate past president of the National Association of YWCA Executives, the past chair of the board of Lifestream Corporation, a current board member of One South Coast Chamber, a member of the board of corporators for Bay Coast Bank, a trustee for Alma Del Mar Charter School, a trustee for Global Learning Charter Public School, a board member of the United Front Development Corp, a board member of the South Coast LGBTQ Network, a board member for the South Coast Community Foundation, a board member for the Youth Opportunities Unlimited organization in New Bedford, and she serves as the board secretary of the Cape Verdean Association in New Bedford. Gail is also the host of the Dartmouth cable television show, Voices of Women. Thank you, Gail, for being here tonight, and I'm excited now to pass the mic over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Jordan. Wow, that's a lot. Would you hear it read back to you? All the things that you do. But again, thank you all for being here tonight. Thank you for inviting me to participate. Shout out to my classmate, Bishop Stain, class of '89, Sarah Thomas, on this call. You look exactly the same, right? You look exactly the same. We even were in the same homeroom because Silva was my maiden name. So we were in a lot of classes together. So great to see you and great to be here, and so great to, talk about the great work. Kudos to Jordan. I'm so grateful to have her on the staff and as part of our leadership team at the YWCA. It's been such great work that she has done and her team has done in the issue on racial injustice and gender equity and advocacy too. So I'm here to talk to you a little bit about what we've been doing the past few months, but going back a few years, several years, to the work of the YWCA and our mission to empower women and eliminate racism, which is an intersectional mission that the YWCA made the change in the 70s. And the short story of that is that all women cannot be empowered until racism is eliminated, because even the YWCA's, going back to its history into the 1800s, was segregated, including here in the United States. So women, when I read our archives, even here in New Bedford, you can see the smart, wonderful women, even back to the early, 1800s and 1900s, that knew that, it wasn't right. It wasn't inclusive to just be young, to just be Christian, and to just be white. And what those letters, originally stand for, and we celebrate that as part of our history. But the YWCA is ever evolving and ever changing, to meet the needs of our communities, and that has changed, throughout the years. So our focus since the 70s has been that, but even the past few months, I think it's just gone to a whole nother level, even for us locally, and the work that we've done. We, again, have been doing racial justice workshops for a long time, and for a lot of people that sounds like a new thing, like, oh, we didn't know that the YWCA did that, and why is that important, you know, to your mission and the people that we're serving. But we work with so many people that are struggling on a day-to-day basis, and not just because of the pandemic. They were already struggling, and we're seeing even more people. And the role that race plays in that, as we all know, is integral. How that affects their housing, how that affects their healthcare, how that affects their job, still having to go to work, you know, every day to make ends meet. And it just goes through the course of everything that they do. So fast forward to this year, we, you know, we're working home remotely as everybody else and most people, and we're doing, and then we started doing community conversations after the murder of George Floyd on Memorial Day weekend, and went into full mode of how do we come together to talk, to have our voices be heard at a time where you can't get together, which is, you know, a challenge even for us when you're used to doing that face-to-face interaction. But looking at the bright side with Zoom, the things that you can change is you can have many more people. We probably would not have had 500 people if we had done this in person. So over the course of about a month, we held 5 community conversations and really gave a voice for people, where we just sat and listened, people heard people's stories, people shared, and really had an in-depth conversation. And what made that different this time is we kept pushing the envelope. We kept challenging people, and other people were challenging each other, that it's not just enough to talk about it, but we need to take action. But before we do the action, we have to do the work. And the work starts on an individual level. So that's what we do, even when we're teaching our workshops, is you have to start with self. And this is an ongoing journey. I don't pretend to be an expert of doing this work. I'm learning every session that I facilitate, I learn from. Every session that I participate in, I learn from, because you learn from other people as well as from your own, you know, experiences that I've had, even myself as a woman of color, going to a Catholic high school, which is predominantly all white, which I could tell tons of stories about that as I reflect on that things that you don't think about at the time that are going on, but that you reflect on later on, you know, as you get older too. So after the community conversations, what actually bubbled up out of that, which is really nicely, because it came like through that grassroots, through the community, is the 10 working groups that we have that are really digging deep and looking at how systemic racism and institutional racism and white supremacy really focus on housing, education, LGBTQ issues, healthcare, women and girls, food justice, and there's so many other issues that these groups, and over 100 people, 100 volunteers are participating, with our board members and other community people taking the lead. Jordan and I and a couple of other staff, we are staff support. We are there to support them, but giving them the opportunity to lead, giving them the opportunity to bring in other people, other work, to look at not just things that go on in New Bedford, but go on in surrounding communities, looking at your own community. And, you know, why is it that, you know, what's the percentage of people of color living in your area? Percentage of people of color going to the schools? And why is that? And really looking at the historical view and going back in some of the workshops that we're facilitating to look at the historical context and how we got to be where we are. Doing things like the film series, when we featured the 13th, some of the books that I know you're reading, that we're reading as well in our book club, to really lay that groundwork, to really study that, and to see how do we make those changes. And we know that it's not easy for that to happen at all, but we need to have these conversations and be okay with it being uncomfortable, be okay with it being not safe, but being brave. And that's something we use when we do our workshops all the time, because you're going to hear things that might not be the greatest thing, and things that you might not even believe that have happened to people of color right here in our own community, not just what you see on TV or what you see in social media, but have happened right here at our schools, at our stores, at where people live, where people walk their dog every day, and hearing, you know, stories about someone who's afraid to turn around in someone's driveway, you know, as a Black woman. And you know, and you hear all of these different stories of people that are experiencing racism right here, right now in our community. Until we share those stories, until we accept that, we can't move on. We can't be able to go forward. Last week, we did a post-election panel similar to what you're doing here, and had different people talk about different issues. And we had a great conversation about healing and what that means for people, because you're hearing that now, like it's time to heal, it's time to move on, it's time to come together, it's time to be united. And wait a minute, no, we're not ready to heal. We haven't addressed all of these issues. And by doing that, that plays into, let's make people feel good. Let's, the election's over. For some people, your candidate won, other people, your candidate didn't win. But let's just move on and sweep these things under the rug. And at the YWCA, we're committed that, we don't want that to happen. We don't want people to just go on because the next thing comes up, the next unfortunate crisis comes up, or the next thing of the moment. That this is the work that if people said that they're really committed, because everybody came out with a press release, everybody came out with, we're going to do X, Y, Z. Well, let's keep doing it. And we need to hold each other accountable. Are you really doing that? When you're looking at a lot of the organizations that we're working with here in Southeastern Massachusetts, not just even New Bedford, we have some that are even in the Cape right now, really talking about what are you doing internally at your organization, looking at your staff, looking at your board, looking at your leadership. Is it reflective of the community you're serving? Is it really doing that? And are you really doing that? And what's the pipeline for people of color to move up, not just as direct care staff, but as middle managers, as senior leadership? We're talking with educators, what you're teaching in the classroom, what policies through school committees and other governing bodies, and really looking at that and getting past just diversity, equity, inclusion, but really digging deep and really, moving forward. So that's some of the things that we've been working on. 2021, we have big plans, really finishing up the working groups, in the next month and putting those plans into action, because they're not going to be plans that are going to sit away. We know there's volunteers that are ready to take those balls and run with them, going forward, and really looking at some of these different systems and how we can really, make those changes. And it was really powerful hearing, some of our speakers talk and some of our groups, and really seeing the pain and the hurt and the anger that really needs to be dealt with and talked about. But then how do we come together as in allyship, for those of us that are white? How do we do that? How do we support? But then how do you do your own work, and don't expect people of color to do that for you? That you have to do your own work to be able to, move forward, and how that we come together when everybody's on the same place once you do your work to move that forward. So I know that we're really excited. Jordan and the team have great things, coming up. We have a session next month actually about how to be an ally and what that really means, and to be all in, to really say that you're going to do the work. We have a lot of resources, books and films and groups that we're doing, and we're going to keep this, moving forward. But we want to do a lot of advocacy work, and really want to make systemic change. Policing is one of them that I forgot to mention. That's a big one. I'm on the police commission use of force here in New Bedford, and I think there's going to be some changes coming soon. So thank you. I know I'm out of time, but thank you for having me, and looking forward to good discussion and conversation tonight. Thank you, Stacy, for having me too.
Thank you so much, Gail. I always love hearing what the YW is up to and all of the great activities that are going on. So I am Frances Kearns. I am a resident of Mattapoisett, and I am a member of the OOR District School Committee. And it is my great pleasure and honor to introduce Dr. Shanna Howell. Dr. Howell was named the Dean of Bristol Community College, New Bedford campus in August 2019, after working as Director of Student Success at Grandview University in Des Moines, Iowa. Dr. Howell earned her Bachelor of Science in Sociology at the University of West Georgia, her Master of Science in Adult Learning and Organizational Performance from Drake University in Iowa, and her Doctor of Philosophy in Educational Leadership and Policy Studies, Community College Leadership Program from Iowa State University in Ames, Iowa. In addition to her many career accomplishments, Shanna has served as a volunteer for the United Way of Central Iowa's annual graduation walk, which encourages high school students who have dropped out of school to complete requirements for their high school diploma. She has also supported the annual Back to School Bash at the John R. Grubb YMCA in Des Moines, Iowa, that serves and supports underrepresented students from pre-kindergarten through grade 12. Today, Shanna is a proud member of the United Way of Greater New Bedford Board and most recently accepted to be a board member for the Our Sister School located in New Bedford. Welcome.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be able to speak with you all tonight. Let me start off by saying, if you hear anything in the background, it's my 5-year-old son who's getting a little bit more TV time tonight. So he's a little bit excited. So if you hear him, that's what it is. Just ignore him. Again, thank you so much for having me. I was honored when I was asked to come to speak to you all tonight. And what I kind of want to do is just kind of give a brief overview of higher education and what higher education in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts is doing, so we can kind of have an understanding when it comes to higher ed. How are we looking at the current state of our country, just in general, and what we as an institution at Bristol Community College, what are some of the things that we're doing also? So first, I just want to kind of just give you a little background. In 2019, the Department of Higher Education in Massachusetts decided that it was important for us to look at various areas in higher education. So not just four-year institutions, but as well as community colleges. And they implemented what is called the equity agenda. And on this equity agenda, they have 4 goals, but a couple goals that they do have is in reference into attainment of an associate's degree and bachelor's degree for individuals in the Latinx community, as well as African Americans. If you know that in South Coast, we are one of the lowest regions to attain an associate's degree and definitely a bachelor's degree. So we know for our area, it's vitally important that we help our community by increasing the number of individuals who are attending college. So this equity agenda has basically put it to figure out ways to not just get individuals to our campuses, but how do we retain them? What support do they need while they're on our campuses? And then how do we, for those who are interested, how do we make sure that they transfer and get to the right institution and kind of are prepared for that? So we at Bristol, we have made it our mission, not just our mission, but it's also part of our strategic plan that just went into effect this fall. It's a 5-year plan, and the equity agenda is threaded throughout the entire strategic plan. There's basically no part of it that does not address the equity agenda, because we know how important it is to our community that we address this lack of education attainment that we currently have in our area. So Bristol, this just to kind of tell you some other things that we're doing besides just making sure we do our work when it comes to the equity agenda. After the death and murder of George Floyd, we immediately put together a social justice quick forum, not even a week after the death of George Floyd. And this was just an opportunity mainly for our students. Our first one was really focused on giving our students the opportunity to have a space to talk. We also had individuals from the community. I actually was a part of this particular forum. But this gave our students, all students, not just Black and Brown students, but all students the opportunity to kind of voice how they were feeling at this time. We know a lot of individuals were angry. They didn't know what to do with this frustration. So this gave us an opportunity to talk. Our Director of Multicultural Affairs, Rob Dedalou, is the one who's put these forums together. And we've continued to have more forums. We have forums on policing, and we actually had police chiefs from Fall River, from our Bristol Community College and other areas to talk about race and policing, because that is one subject that can be very touchy. And a lot of times it's hard to find police officers who want to actually engage in that conversation. But it was a great opportunity for us to ask the questions that we all wanted to know. Why do these things happen? What is the training that police officers receive? When we talk about, bias and so forth, why are these things happening? So it was a very great and open conversations. There have been other forums throughout the summer, one on LGBTQA, and we actually have our last one of the year this Thursday. And it will be on race and immigrants. And I can put something in the chat, a link. So if any of you are interested, As we, think about a lot of the individuals in our community, it's important for us to understand the rights and the responsibilities we have as educators to support all of our students, no matter what their background is, where they come from, and to make sure that we have the resources at our institutions to support those students. Through this pandemic, we've had, it's been a big change for a lot of us. But one thing that we at Bristol have tried to make it seen and known to our students is that we're here to support them. So whether it be by providing them Chromebooks, if they didn't have Chromebooks at home to be able to do their schoolwork, we offered that. We did that in the very beginning in March. We were offering Chromebooks to our students. But what we realized is that our students needed other resources, such things as food insecurity, housing insecurity. We get phone calls every day with students saying that they need to drop out of school or they're not going to be able to continue because of the lack of resources that they have. So thankfully, we have various people in the communities that we can refer our students to. We were very fortunate. We were an institution that received funding, the CARES Act that a lot of you probably have heard about. We were an institution that was given money to support our students. So, it's one of those things that we want to put the money in their hands so that they could maybe get internet. I mean, it's for some of us, we may think internet, wow, they should be able to get that. But we have a lot of students who don't have internet, and they also have children who are at home trying to do their schoolwork as well. It makes me think about, there's an African proverb that talks about, if you want to educate a community, you have to educate our women. In Bristol, we have a lot of women. We have a lot of women who are adult learners who are at home at the kitchen table with their children trying to do their schoolwork. And so we want to do whatever we can. Excuse me. So we want to do whatever we can to make sure that we can support our students and that we can, whatever, if it's something that's outside of our realm, that we can refer them to the appropriate departments. So that's kind of what we're doing in higher ed. We have been very fortunate to have done some work with UMass Dartmouth as well. They've been supporting us because we do have students on campus. I know some of you may wonder, but at our New Bedford and our Fall River campus, we actually have students in a lot of our health science programs, culinary arts, who are actually on campus. I don't know about you, but I would rather have my nurse practicing in person than to be doing it online. So there's some areas that we, have taken precautions to make sure that we are able to get our students to be able to continue their education and move forward. So we all know we need more nurses in our communities, and our hope is that we can support those students to finish up, and so that we can have more availability of nurses from our community in our community, as well as dental hygienists and occupational therapy assistants. So I think Bristol, I tell people all the time, I've been here just over a year, and I always have every time I meet someone, they have a family member, a cousin, a neighbor, or someone who has attended Bristol. And I think that it's important to know that we are doing everything that we can to support our students and support our community as well. We give out food once a month for our community. It's just not for our students. So there are several things that we have implemented to support those individuals who may need the support. And you never know, coming to grab a box of food, individual may decide that, you know what, maybe I need to go back to school. And so I think that we can connect individuals to the right resources and education. We can definitely see a change in our community. That's it.
Thank you so much, Shanna. Before COVID, BC, I worked at the New Bedford campus mostly, and I can attest to Shanna's energy and her liveliness. And I think BCC is really lucky to have her. Bristol is really lucky to have Shanna. Thank you so much. And there are some students whose name I recognize on the call tonight. So you're speaking right to their hearts. And I have the pleasure of introducing Shirin Edwin. She is the Dean of Arts and Humanities at Bristol Community College. Previously, she served as New York University Shanghai's Associate Professor of Comparative Literature and Global Network Associate Professor in 2018, and as an Associate Professor of French at Sam Houston State University in Huntsville, Texas. She earned her doctorate in French and Francophone literature from Vanderbilt University in Nashville, Tennessee. Shirin's teaching, research, and service interests focus on topics of social, gendered, and religious justice, self-determination, and self-expression in post-colonial and comparative African and Islamic literature. She is the author of Privately Empowered, Expressing Islamic Feminism in Northern Nigerian Fiction, and her book on transnational feminism, The Space of the Transnational, is forthcoming with SUNY Press. So here she is to share with us her talk, and she's also my boss. Please welcome Shirin Edwin.
Thank you, Stacy. And I'm not your boss, I'm your colleague. So please consider me your colleague and ally in this wonderful work that you're doing. And I wholeheartedly support your efforts. And thank you very much for inviting me to be part of your community tonight. I'm very privileged to be here. I wanted to share my screen. I have a few slides that I prepared, so I'm going to go ahead and do that. Please bear with me as I manage technology. Oh, there you go. Okay, so that's how, can you all see my slides? Okay, great. So I just prepared a few slides to guide my own thoughts. This was so last minute. So I'm going to talk about, of course, the theme of tonight's conversation, which is social justice, education, and action steps. And I thought I'd just prepare a few ideas to share with you. This is coming from the lens of an educator in higher education who has taught, as Stacey was saying, literatures about African women from sub-Saharan Africa, and especially Muslim women. So to handle one identity is hard enough, and I've always grappled with multiple identities in my teaching and scholarship. So I tried to make this short presentation for you in a most general way as possible, because I do understand that we are a community here of learners and not necessarily academics. So I wanted to start my talk with, there you go. So with power structures, I wanted to start us off by understanding what power structures are. I think that power and privilege are intimately connected. And if we understand how power and privilege relationships operate in society, we'll have a better grip of understanding our own selves and how we operate in society as human beings and individuals. So I believe that instead of looking at big units such as the state or even the city or even countries, we can start with the smallest possible unit, which is the family, and understand how power operates within a family itself, because it has broader ramifications to the society we live in. So when you look at a marital relationship within a family, or you look at, say, a relationship between a parent and a child, these are all structured around power and privilege. Even the smallest microscopic unit of our lives is actually structured by power. And power creates privilege, and that's the privilege then that structures the society that we live in. And I say this because all our power comes from our identities, the way we connect to who we are. And how is identity organized in society? Essentially, it's organized around these different lines, these affiliations that we ourselves appropriate, or these lines that are given to us, these identity lines, such as gender. So I could be, consider myself a woman or a woman XN, and the X there in that term means that most feminist groups refuse to use the letter A in the word woman to try and counter the sexist connotation of the gendered identity woman. So they replaced the letter A in the word with X as a statement on feminism, or another way of identifying ourselves would be man or non-binary or cisgender. And so there are many, many different identity lines along, for gendered identity. And then of course there's religion. Many of us choose religion as a line of identity, but there's so many to name here. So I just put that in parentheses. And then if you go down the list, you'll see how we organize ourselves and how we determine our identities along, say, racial lines, ethnic, along age lines, the languages we speak, the sexuality that we identify with or we appropriate or that is given to us, or nationality, and the list goes on and on. And so what I find as an educator, having taught all of these classes that I've taught at colleges and universities, that power and privilege are organized around these identity lines that we give to others or we give ourselves. And so as an educator, and so this was the other line of my talk that I wanted to briefly mention, as an educator, I'm constantly thinking about two things. As an instructor, say in a college or in a university, there are two things that I am primarily preoccupied with. One is knowledge production. That's what we do in schools and colleges and universities. We produce knowledge through research. And the other one is knowledge dissemination, which many students will identify with, because when we come to you in your classrooms, that's what we're doing. We're disseminating knowledge. We produce the knowledge through our research, and then we disseminate it in our classes. And so two guiding principles have always ushered me along in my teaching and research, and I produced two famous sayings. One is by James Baldwin. You must be familiar with this. He said, I want American history taught. Unless I'm in that book, you're not in it either. And what that means is that as an instructor, when I'm crafting a syllabus, I'm constantly preoccupied with who to include and who to exclude. Who gets to be in the syllabus? Whose knowledge should I represent? Who gets to stay in that syllabus, and what can I possibly teach, and who gets left out? And that's where the politics of a syllabus is something that constantly preoccupies instructors when they are crafting a syllabus on, say, equity, diversity, inclusivity, or justice. And the second one, as an educator of literatures and women's experiences and minoritized women's experiences, I always look at the second quote is by a Chinese poet. He was one of the most famous poets of the 20th century in China. His name is Lu Xun. And there's a little story behind what this saying is all about. He gave up a very lucrative career in medicine to take up writing, and became one of the most influential poets in modern China. And when he was asked why he was giving up medicine, because by default we want to take up those careers, he said, how can I heal the body when the soul is sick? And so as an educator, I'm constantly motivated and guided by that saying, by what Lu Xun said, because I cannot think about a lucrative career. I cannot think about the money-making business unless I heal who I am as an individual, unless I cure who I am as an individual. And I often say this, given the context even of tonight's talk, what happened to George Floyd was not really a computer malfunction. It wasn't that some machine malfunctioned. It was somebody's moral compass that malfunctioned. And I always believe that if such leaders, such legislators, such social actors as policemen or as social workers, anyone had taken a class on race, on justice, on equity, on gender, on tolerance, on equality, maybe we would not have had the situation we are facing today, not just in the United States, but the world over. And so as an instructor constantly teaching these types of literatures by women in sub-Saharan Africa, all the other, on the other side of the globe, countries we've never possibly heard of, countries we couldn't even place on the map, if we tried. But I'm constantly preoccupied with these questions about who gets to be in the syllabus, whose knowledge, when knowledge is produced, whose knowledge do I get to represent? And then that brings me to the second question. Why diversity? Why is it important? Why, as an instructor, should I equitably distribute my syllabus? Why should I make sure that everybody has a chance to be represented in the syllabus? Everybody's knowledge that is worth learning should be in the syllabus. And so some of the reasons that I wanted to share with you, and I've come to realize myself, is that we don't live in an isolated environment. We don't live on our own by ourselves. We live in a globalized world. And therefore, a syllabus, a class that represents diverse perspectives really looks at the world through, or society through, global optics. We have to understand that at some point in our lives, we will come to interact with people who are different from us. We will interact with people who think differently from us. So we ourselves must educate ourselves, but we must also ensure that our children are getting that diverse education, because they need the tools to function efficiently in a world that is progressively changing, in a society whose demography is progressively changing. And so we know with math, when we want our children to develop math skills, we tell them to practice more. But we tell them to practice a diverse set of problems. We don't just tell them to practice the same math problem because we know they've mastered the principle. Well, that's the same analogy I use when it comes to diversifying my syllabus, because we want our students to have diverse types of problem-solving skills. We want to expose them to not just problem set A that they know probably and they've mastered, but problem set B, C, D, E, F that can only come from an exposure to diverse points of view and diverse perspectives. It isn't enough just to learn about a writer from a particular geographic region. It means that we must also see the expression of a writer from another geography that we are not aware of. So what we're doing here is, by diversifying the education that we give our students, we are preparing them to function efficiently, hire equitably, solve a diverse range of problems. And research shows that when we do that through these courses, such as courses on gender, on race, on justice, on ethnicity, and languages, there is lowered violence in society. There is less violence because now we are looking at more tolerance, since people are exposed to diverse points of view. And so some action steps that I thought of, because I know I'm not talking entirely to an academic audience, is that what we can do as community residents is perhaps seek greater partnerships with schools, colleges, and universities. Some of us may not have the time anymore to go back to college to take a class. Nevertheless, I believe through public libraries, we could start a summer series, a summer lesson series on, say, films or music or pop culture that exposes us to different themes and topics. We may not have the time to take a college class, but that should not stop us from exploring different types of themes and topics that would make us more tolerant. And then as a parting thought, I wanted to leave you with a writer that I thought would be a good suggestion, not just for a book club, but even if you were to start a summer series at a public library, you could begin by looking at her work, and that's GLORIA Anzaldua, who was a Chicana, gay activist, a poet, an artist, and a writer. So she folded in many different talents and skills and ideas. And one book that I want to leave you with is Borderlands, or La Frontera, that she wrote in 1987, though she is, of course, known for many, many books and many of her works. And she said, just to encapsulate this intersectional, multidimensional identity that Anzaldua educated us about. She said, I identify as a woman. And whatever in a woman in, whatever in, I have the whole quote, actually it's blocked by my, the Zoom video, so I can't read the whole thing, but I'm sure you can see the quote that she tries to explain her multidimensional intersectional identity. And she's so well known, not just in college classes on gender and feminist and sexuality studies, but also there is a society for the study of GLORIA ANZALDUA that memorializes her work. So I encourage you to look at her work just as citizens who are interested in learning more about intersectional feminism, about race relations in the United States, and also if you're interested in a global optics of what really our society is grappling with today. So that's all I have to say, and thank you very much for listening. I'm going to stop sharing once I figure out how to do that.
That was great. Thank you.
How do I stop sharing?
I think if you click on the green button in the middle of your screen at the bottom.
I think it's on the
Oh,
bottom.
there it is. Okay. Oh, there I see it. Okay.
You want me to read the, oh, okay. I was gonna read it.
Oh, sorry.
Well, thank you, Dr. Edwin. I think that all of us really benefited from that, and I'm excited to even continue as we watch this, so everybody knows tonight's event is being recorded, so we will be able to share that. I think a number of us, if not all, will be coming back to all of the speakers who have talked thus far. I'd also like just to take a second here to, as we have one last speaker, Marlene Pollock, but we'd also like to just suggest that everybody please feel free to introduce yourself in the chat. Tell us where you're calling in from tonight, perhaps what your affiliation is. And also, if you're interested in connecting with the organizers of tonight's event about volunteer opportunities or anything else, please put your email or phone number in the chat and we will save that and get back to everybody. So it is now my pleasure to introduce Marlene Pollock, a great friend to me and to the YWCA, and we're so glad she could be here to join us tonight. Marlene is a co-founder of the Coalition for Social Justice, which has just celebrated its 25th anniversary. Yeah, CSJ. Marlene is the lead organizer for the New Bedford chapter. CSJ has been a statewide leader in campaigns for economic, racial, and environmental justice, always in campaign mode. CSJ attracts dozens of volunteers to make phone calls, go door to door, pre-pandemic, lobby legislators, and go up to rallies at the State House to champion bills that remove barriers for struggling families, promote criminal justice reforms, and prevent environmental threats. I'll put a note in here that CSJ was a lead organizer throughout the Get Out the Vote initiatives, hosting phone banking drives, text banking drives. I mean, we were doing it all. So thank you to CSJ's leadership about how to get out the vote in our community. In a campaign to rid the New Bedford Public Schools of patronage and nepotism, Marlene ran and was elected twice to the New Bedford School Committee, which she served on for 8 years. I'd like to note too that she was instrumental in helping a dear friend of mine now become the lone woman serving on the New Bedford School Committee. So we thank Marlene for her leadership and guidance in lifting other women up to leadership positions in our community. Marlene is a retired history professor who spent over 30 years teaching history at Bristol Community College. Her focus was on world history, bringing to the forefront the struggles of people around the world for liberation from European imperialism. Marlene, the mic is yours. Thank you so much for being here tonight.
Marlene, we can't hear you yet. There you go.
Yeah, that helps to unmute. But anyway, thank you very much for inviting me representing CSJ. And I forgot that I put all that stuff in my bio. So I might be a little redundant. What I wanted to talk about today is, number one, the model that we use, and Jordan kind of went over it, the idea of us always being in campaign mode, and then how we choose issues to work around. So so over the years, we had tried many different types of community work, and it took a while for us to get it right. By the mid 90s, we had developed this model of mobilizing a lot of volunteers to participate in activities that would help us win progressive causes, mostly at the state level. But the model that we use certainly can be used at local level. And what it is we outreach heavily to all kinds of folks. I'm hoping some of the people on this meeting tonight will join us to get involved in reaching out to their neighbors and voters to call their representatives around legislation. We have been pretty successful, not always, but we have been the lead on paid family medical leave. I don't know if you guys know, but in January, you will start being able to have paid family medical leave benefits. And so it was quite exciting for us to lead that campaign. We also were the lead on the earned sick time victory in 2016, which for the first time enabled many people to take 40 hours of time off to take their kids to the doctor, their parents to the doctor, be sick, stay home with their children, and not fear reprisals from their bosses. And we have been involved in every single effort to raise the minimum wage since 1998. And we have also chosen these issues, what to work on, because these are the issues that affect the communities that are most hard hit, which are often Black and Brown communities who have suffered most from the decline of living wage jobs and the decline of the union movement. So when we got these victories, I mean, literally, I remember working, while I was part of the MCCC union, but, even working before when I was younger, that you had sick time, you had vacation days, you had paid leave. Now with at least over 1 million workers in the state don't have any of that except for the things that we have been able to work on. And it's not just us. We work in coalition with groups all around the state as well as locally to get these victories, right? One of our great achievements was joining in a statewide effort in 2015 to 18 to essentially reform the criminal legal system. I realized, actually it's Rasan Hall from the ACLU was the first guy who said to me, there's no justice in our criminal legal system. So we call it the criminal legal system because the justice part of it is pretty limited. And so that was a massive 3-year effort, and we made some big breakthroughs on that. And although there are many more issues to go, I have to say, working on this, you start to see Massachusetts in a very different light. We are a backward state in terms of the criminal legal system, and surprisingly, there are red states who have better systems than we have here. It's a prison industrial complex that is dedicated to promoting jobs and contracts for a select few at the expense of a population that is really systematically attacked and allowed to be this revolving door that keeps going in and out of jail. So to keep those benefits. By the way, Governor Baker in this last budget said he did not want to close any prisons, even though the prison population has been decreasing drastically over the years, right? Anyway, we have always prioritized the criminal justice work because it so disparately targets the Black community and other people of color. So if you do work in that area, and you are able to be successful, you're going to improve a lot of things for people. And we find that many people, just your average people, agree with us, but they don't know what they can do about it. They doubt that they can have any impact. And I think all of us need to have a vehicle to express change and a way to make a real difference, but in a way that doesn't take over your life. When I was younger, I wanted everybody to devote 100% of their life, like I was, to social change. And then I began to learn, wait a minute. A lot of people agree with us, feel strongly, but they've got a lot of other commitments. And how can we make it so that they can participate and really make a difference? And what we came up with was choosing campaigns that affect people widely, are viable in the sense that we have a shot to win them. And this is mostly at the state level, and that we can involve people to make calls, especially to legislators, to meet with legislators. I mean, we're not doing a lot of stuff, of course, because of the pandemic, but we always go up. We were going, prior to the pandemic, I swear to God, we were going up to Boston every other week, busloads of people, to fight for all the different issues on our agenda. And you know, so right now, one of our current battles, we have a multi-issue agenda, but we are trying to win a strong police accountability bill in Massachusetts. As you might have heard about, of course, after the death of George Floyd and so many other people, I think particularly in the Senate and up in Boston, they really wanted to take a step. And the step that they chose was to try to limit qualified immunity. Qualified immunity is a doctrine that essentially protects the police from being held accountable if they commit violence, or mayhem on civilians, right? And so the Senate came up with a very strong bill, and the House, unfortunately, and I have a lot of people that are in the House, their bill was not so good. And what happens when you have two different bills, one in the House and one in the Senate, you have to have a conference committee that comes together to somehow synthesize these two bills, which are very different. But, we've been waiting for them to come out with their synthesis. It's been a while. At the end of the summer, we hooked up with the ACLU because they were doing these automated phone banks, which are terrific. We've used them for many years. It's called Hub Dialer. And we were able to get a bunch of people on that. And now we're also getting people to make calls, so that we have to date, just to give you an idea, we have made 3,000 phone calls on police accountability. We have gotten 125 people that we have patched through directly to talk to their representative, and that we have had 310 people said that they will call, and many of them we have to follow up and make sure they do. But anyway, and it's interesting because we targeted in this most recent calling, which we're doing just out of CSJ. We're not, the ACLU right now is not doing phone banks, is to target one of our very dear friends, Representative Cronin, who happens to be the leader of the Judiciary Committee. She's the chair, but she is also one of the 6 people on this conference committee. And we have a chapter in Brockton. So we are able to get a list of voters that are in her district. And we understand, by the way, that she requested us to do this. They're not hearing enough from the community. They're hearing too much from the police. And I think, just this is my own opinion, I feel like some of them feel bullied by the police. She requested that we make calls. So that's what we are doing now. We're making them on what we call the virtual phone bank. And we're seeking out people who think like us and asking them to call Claire Cronin and leave a message that they want her to pass a strong police accountability bill. And, with us, with the legislature, it's always an ongoing struggle. You can't really expect to win right away. It's just, you have to keep pushing and pushing. But the more people that we have to make these calls and direct this pressure, because we are the many, right? And if the many who I think really, I think that a lot of people really got sick by these police deaths and everything and want to do something, this is something that they can do. So I hope, I know I'm out of time, but I hope if any of you, I'm going to leave my phone number in the chat. If any of you would like to join on this campaign that we're doing probably up until the middle of next week because of Thanksgiving, please feel free to call me. And I have Sharon Matzik as one of my compadres in CSJ. and as well as Phoebe and Dave from Mattapoisett as well. Ah, yes, prison industrial complex, yes. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Marlene. So now I'd like to open up the floor to some questions from the group. If you can place your questions in the chat, I'd appreciate it. I also want to follow up on a previous question that I saw earlier in the discussion regarding where folks can go to find organizations to support, particularly from the feedback from some of our presenters today. The YWCA, their website is www.ywcasema.org. And on their website, they have a list of organizations that they've partnered with. Also, the Coalition for Social Justice, and that link is in the chat. And also a link to bristolcc.edu, the information that Dr. Howell shared regarding immigrants' rights, race and immigrants' rights. All right, so a question for Marlene Pollock. What are some of the things you would like to see in a police accountability bill?
Well, thank you for that question. There's many different facets to the bills that were passed. I mean, barring chokeholds. I know one of the reps in the House had come up with a amendment that she wanted to make sure that if they were going to do a warrantless search, what they do with Breonna Taylor, just bust into somebody's house, that they had to make sure that there were no children or elderly there. That passed in the House. That did not pass in the Senate. So that would be something that we'd like to see. We're focusing on qualified immunity because it makes it so difficult for victims of police abuse to get justice. And so what the Senate bill would do would be to even out the playing field. So let me give you an example. If somebody has, yeah, thank you, no knock warrants. Thanks, Gail. If somebody wanted to get justice from a police officer who abused them, they can only prove to get justice, they can only prove that they were threatened. They can't say that they were actually targeted or beat up or injured by a policeman. So part of the accountability in this bill was to make it easier for people to bring those civil rights lawsuits by saying that it's not just threats, it's also actual abuse that should be considered when discussing civil rights violations. Also, the other thing would be if you are deemed to have suffered a civil rights violation, then the person would be able to sue the police officer, take their home, take their car. And that appealed to me because if you read a lot of people's, actually former police officers, Black police officers, they'll say, unless you make police officers suffer the consequences, it will keep on going. It's not a matter of training. It's not a matter of, with one bad apple. It's a culture of no consequences. So once you start making the consequences clear and forthright or significant, then that will decrease the instances.
Thank you so much. So I have a question for Dr. Howell and Dr. Edwin. I work in K through 12, and one of my biggest challenges is finding educators that look like our students. Diversification of staff is one of my biggest challenges. Is this an issue in higher ed? Great question.
I can start off. Yes, and yes, and yes. It is. It's a huge issue. There's a lot of research out there that says that when you look at the diversity of your student population, it should be represented in the faculty and staff of that institution. So, for example, if there's 45% of your students who identify as Black and Latino or Latinx, then your faculty and staff should be that same percentage. But unfortunately, in most institutions, this is actually my 5th institution, and I can broadly say that this is an issue that a lot of institutions across the country It's not just in Massachusetts. I've worked in the Midwest. I've worked in the South. It's a huge issue everywhere. But the best way for us to change that is to educate our students, the ones that we have, and encourage them to be our next educators. I say the same thing in K through 12. In order to have more students who, more staff and teachers that look like the students, we have to make sure that we encourage our students to get into education. Unfortunately, higher education is a little bit different because the percentage of individuals of color who make it to higher education is not always as high as their white counterparts. So how do we make, working in higher education or in education in general, how do we make it look good? As we know, in most cases, educators don't make as much as, say, an engineer or a doctor or whatever, these different fields. So it's not very attractive to individuals, period, not just individuals of color. So this is actually a conversation that we're having at Bristol right now. How do we attract more individuals? And my answer is with the question, how do we not just attract more individuals, but how do we keep them? So the other part of it that I always say is that what happens a lot of times, especially with hiring faculty, is that if I'm a white chemist, most likely I know other white chemists. So I'm going to get my friend who's a white chemist to come and work at my institution. So how do we make sure that our faculty enlarge their circle of friends and associates to make sure that they have connections with people of all backgrounds so that they would encourage them to come and work at your institutions. There are many organizations, journals out there for individuals of different backgrounds to in higher education. How do we reach out to those individuals who are readers of those various journals and so forth? If you're an engineer and you want a Black engineer, you're going to go to the National Association of Black Engineers. So I think institutions have to do a better job of purposely reaching out and looking for individuals who may look a little bit different or come from different backgrounds, and purposely reaching out to them to bring them into these jobs. And I say this is not just in education, I say this is everywhere. It's not just education that we have issues with diversity of staff. I think you can probably look in different areas of employment and notice that that's just a problem. But so how do we get the people there, but also how do we keep them, and how do we encourage them to, how do we make them feel like they're needed and their voice is important, and it's a place that they feel welcome. Shirin, I don't know if you had anything to add.
Yes, if I could quickly jump in, actually, I have a slightly different answer, but I do agree with what Shanna is saying. I approached this because I've thought so much about it. The demography of the United States has started changing only in the last 10 or 20 years dramatically. So for that shift to actually register and get represented in our workforce is going to take longer. However, education can't wait. So the way I figured this out is that we should start again, like I was saying, with the syllabus, what we teach. It matters less who's teaching it, provided that person is educated enough to teach it. So what would be more interesting to me is that even a person in a privileged position, whatever that privilege might look like, male, white, heterosexual, should be able to, or be trained or in a position to teach the topics we need to teach our students. What is more dangerous to me is not having taught those topics and leaving school thinking that everything worth learning was produced by someone who's white, male, heterosexual, or Western. That's more dangerous to me than just having someone from a minority group be there in the class, because we can't even assume that that person from the minority group will necessarily bring their life experiences and teach that in the syllabus. So for me, as an educator, it all starts and ends with that syllabus, the curriculum. If you decolonize, de-imperialize the syllabus, you have a better chance of broadening and I think decolonizing society itself, because the thought is out there, rather than assuming that a person of color will come along and do the talking for you. So I would go to all my white faculty, Bristol is a dominantly white institution, and say, here's the curriculum, let's decolonize it. Let's diversify it. You do the talking, take these topics out. You make the effort. You go educate yourself. Let's give you professional development. Let's give you all the resources you need. You make sure that your syllabus and what you're teaching and that curriculum you're teaching is diverse enough for the students to know that knowledge is produced by non-dominant groups as well. But I agree with Shanna, that will take time, that, you know, we'll have people of color and people from underrepresented groups to come up to, as Shanna was saying, the higher education levels, because we lag behind in the representation of these groups in jobs that require higher education. I believe the syllabus can't wait, maybe because I'm impatient.
Thank you so much. So I have a question for Gail. How are teens able to get involved and make a change in our community or world during the pandemic, especially?
That's a great question too. I mean, it has been challenging, but we still have, I think we have 2 interns right now from BCC. So they're doing a remote internship. So Jordan is the coordinator for our volunteers. So we have made it work. And she can, talk about that more, and because she does coordinate all of our volunteers and internships. But we have a youth council, which is high school students from not just New Bedford High School, but some of the other area high schools, which really work on advocacy issues. Like they always work on the election. Right now, they're getting ready to do a coat drive and a Thanksgiving drive. They've helped out with census. So they really focus on social justice issues and really learning about leadership. Starting with 9th grade all the way through 12th grade, and then it's just facilitated by the YWCA. They lead. There's a president, and so they're learning Robert's rules. They're learning how to volunteer, how to do service, as well, and whatever is their pathway after that, whether it's higher ed or workforce, military. We've had a mix of all of that, but it lays that foundation, for them. But as far as internships, we're still doing that as well. Like I said, with BCC, I think we might have somebody from UMass coming as well, next semester. But right now, advocacy has been the top choice for most of the students coming in, because 2020 has been a year like no other. We knew that going in because we had a lot of plans already with, between the census and get out the vote, the women's anniversary of the women's suffrage for white women and having the right to vote. So we had a lot of things going on as well. So there are many, many opportunities. So even though we can't be together in person, please, email Jordan. I think her email's in the chat, or go to the YWCA website for volunteers. Menstrual access projects, working with young girls. If you want to teach, we're still doing our middle school, girls program, as well, even though it's remote. So there's plenty of opportunities to get involved. And it's a pathway for leadership. We have a commitment of 30% of our board is young women of our board of directors. So that's another, piece that we're always looking for that as well.
Thank you so much, Gail. So I have another question for the group. I spoke with a friend about systemic racism. They concluded, am I supposed to be ashamed of who I am because I'm white? I told them a sense of shame is appropriate, but I had a hard time elaborating that they had a hard time understanding. So how can I explain to my peers how having a sense of shame is an appropriate feeling necessary in working towards an anti-racist society?
Who's going to take that one on?
I think it's just having those conversations. Opening that door for that, and not, shaming someone. And we've heard that before in a lot of our sessions, that white guilt and that white shame, or, it wasn't me, physically that did that, but it's just coming to that understanding. And once you open the door to have that conversation, I think you can dig a little bit deeper and, have a healthy dialogue of why, they feel that way, and, the other person can explain that. But then it gets, it's tough, as a person of color myself, when, you have these conversations, it's, sometimes you're not there, you're not feeling it. You don't want to give, all of these examples of things that have happened to you personally, but having them understand that, here are some, let's have this conversation. Here's some, let's do some research. Why don't you do some reading, or let's look at these things that they can, do some work themselves, and let's come back and have another conversation, and even, because everybody's at a different place on this. I always look at it as a journey, and you come at people where they're at, and I think you start there, because just that they want to have the conversation is a starting point. So if you shut them down completely, then you turn people away. So I always look at it as, let's talk. And it's very difficult, because a lot of people feel that shame, they feel that guilt, they feel personally that they did that, but then it's what you do going forward. Because I always say, once you know, so now you know, so what are you going to do about it? If you're all in with this, when you hear this, whether it's your friend circle, your family, place of work, which is very difficult when you're in, think about being at school, think about being in a work setting, and family, even more so, to have this, to have these conversations, and it takes a lot of strength and a lot of courage, to speak out. And sometimes, you're not there at that moment. And sometimes I know I've been there, like, I'm not dealing with that today. I just don't feel like, doing that, because there's that, as you said, there's that power dynamic, there's that privilege, that comes in, especially when you're younger, that, and the other person is a person of authority, you might not want to say anything, as well. So I believe, conversation is healthy, and just keep talking. And even if you say the wrong thing, or you don't know, just ask, like, I don't know what that means. And we've had this come up in some of our workshops, like, what's the correct terminology? What am I supposed to be saying? I'm not really sure, and then maybe you just ask, that's okay. And sometimes it's generational. We had this come up in one of our workshops too, where someone used a phrase, and not even, I couldn't see her face on the screen, that she's, was an older woman, because it's a generational term that she used. So then how do you have that conversation with people about, how that could be offensive and why, and always try to be, thoughtful, about that, instead of just, totally reacting to, that, and then just understanding and having that conversation. That's how we approach it anyway.
Marlene.
Well, I think also just the responsibility of white people to take up racism where they see it. I mean, even amongst things like who's working as cashiers at Shaw's. I remember a friend of mine who said, her son couldn't get a job because he was a young man of color to be a cashier. They just put people of color on the second and third shifts, loading shelves. I mean, just being aware of that, being aware who's not at the workplace, and what can you do about it? Can you speak to management? I think that the book White Fragility, I think, is a really beneficial book, because first of all, she is somebody who did a lot of diversity training, and we had brought, a bunch of us at BCC, we had tried to bring in diversity trainers, and the kinds of things that people, she's heard over and over again from white people at all these trainings is what we heard at BCC. All this resistance, all this, that's not me, or, and she breaks it down so well, so concretely, things that you can ask people, because nobody wants to be racist, right? I don't know. Somebody said, what today's world, what do you have to do to be racist? Kill somebody? I mean, and so just, she says a lot of things like, how many people of color were in your school? What is considered a good school? I mean, all that is these underlying racial stereotypes that I think people have to work on and be committed to working on. And I think that book is a really helpful tool. And I think in the process of working, trying to change, structures and white people's attitudes, that's how you see more and more how pervasive it is. It's in everything, so.
Thank you so much. Jordan.
Thanks, Frances. I know I'm not a panelist, but I did just want to take an opportunity, as I put something in the chat about a number of events that the YWCA has hosted. And one of our really most popular, most highly requested is actually on understanding whiteness and the history of white racial identity. And that it is a privilege to think you do not have a race, right? And white people do. And it is on us to understand that history of whiteness and how that is where you will understand that history of privilege, of how laws and policies were passed to advantage white individuals and to disadvantage individuals of color. and to understand really, and as we go back to that history of starting with 1619 and building our way through, you then start to, I think that's a really great primer for people to understand how white privilege is historically constructed, and how a classic text I read in my grad program too was When Affirmative Action Was White. And this explains this history of laws and policies that were passed, right, to advantage white individuals. So I highly recommend that. I'll also put in the chat the Seeing White podcast. I think this is a great primer for individuals. You're driving in the car, you're cooking dinner. Please listen to this podcast, which also looks at the history of whiteness. Dr. Kendi is a frequent collaborator on this podcast. You know, we were all reading his book together. I really encourage, to get started with that. And I think too, just as a final point, as we think about white individuals who are finding themselves in a state of discomfort with this work, they're feeling shame, they're feeling uncomfortable, to know that to be an anti-racist, that is a lifelong commitment. You do not get a certificate to be an anti-racist. The work doesn't end today. This is something that myself and others commit ourselves to do this work for the rest of our lives. And it is a privilege to lose interest in dismantling white supremacy and systemic racism, right? So even if you just kind of feel like, I'm really uncomfortable, I need to check out right now, that is privilege. And it does not speak to the danger and the violence that communities of color face every single day. So, and finally, white affinity groups are real and encouraged as well. In White Fragility, she talks very frequently about white tears, that individuals of color are tired of your white tears. They don't have time for it anymore. There are spaces for white individuals to process this information, which can be very spiritual, and people are having tears and frustrations about this. So I encourage you all to seek out those groups. Again, contact the YWCA. We're here to help you process this information and to really, come to this movement with that accountability, to go from ally to all in. And bring accountability to your anti-racism work, and to leave the performativity aside, and to work through that discomfort to continue your journey. So thank you, Frances, for letting me get a chance there. Again, I put some information in the chat, so thanks.
Thank you so much, Jordan. So Stacy, I wanted to check with you to see how we're doing on time.
It's 8:30.
All right.
It's 8:29. And we have some amazing questions in the chat. And so what I think we're going to do is we are going to encourage all of you to stay in touch with us. I've been jotting down information and we will reach out to you. Someone said, are we still going to have some more of these conversations? If they're this fantastic, I would love to have more of these conversations. I am so excited and really thrilled to have been privileged to be part of this. Thank you all so much. Again, my name is Sarah Thomas. I'm a professor at Bridgewater State University. And I just want to thank all of our speakers, Marlene and Shirin and Shanna and Gail. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise and your passion and your commitment to the cause. I also want to just publicly give a big shout out to Stacey Hess, because none of this would have happened if she hadn't texted me and said, we should do this, Sarah. So she is my love and admiration forever. And I, as a teacher of teachers, it's so exciting to get to meet all these people. I'm going to be emailing all of you. You're going to get sick of me. But our next read is Why Are All the Black Kids Sitting Together in the Cafeteria? Dr. Tatum is actually speaking at Bridgewater State University on Thursday to my a social book club that colleagues and I created because of what happened with the murder of George Floyd, and the students saying, we need to do something. We're going to be teachers. How are we going to have these conversations in our classes? And Dr. Edwin, your comment about the syllabus is what we've been talking about. You have to change what you have to include everyone. So we hope you can join us. I would like to introduce our wonderful songwriter and singer, Rebecca, who is going to sing her new song, What's It Gonna Take. And she's probably going to take it from here, Rebecca.
Thank you so much. And thank you to all the speakers. This has been super inspiring and helpful. And yeah, thank you for being here and thank you for having me. And yeah, this is a song I wrote about a month ago. And it's basically, you know, as a teacher myself, I have a degree in music ed from the Hart School. And, you know, back in the day, you know, when I went to school for music education, it was with the idea that it was all inclusive. I was always going to be sharing music one way or another, whether I was on a stage or whether I was teaching. So although I am a singer-songwriter, I am always teaching students. And one of the best ways that that I was always taught and encouraged to was to ask questions, which is what I did with the last song and this one as well, is speaking to different groups that I believe are marginalized in this world and in our country, and you know, asking that question just to encourage the listeners to ask themselves. I think it kind of goes back to what Frances said earlier about like how can I keep the conversation, like Gail had mentioned, keep the conversation going without shutting it down, is to ask a question so that person answers it themselves. So at any rate, this is it's called What's It Gonna Take? What's it gonna take for you to see? There's only wrong or right, there's no in between. If you can see, no speak, no hear, no evil, does it still make a sound? Ashes to ashes, we all fall down. What's it gonna take for you to let me breathe? 'Cause I'm underwater beneath your knee. If it's gonna take a great big tidal wave just to bring you down, gonna carry sand and water to the edges of your town. What's it gonna take for you to let me have love? 'Cause I've been waiting so long, enough is enough. I got so much to give, it's what I believe. So live and let live. Love is everything and it's all that there is. What's it gonna take for you to care about me? 'Cause I serve this country proudly. Can't you see that I'm in pain, that I have gone without? I shouldn't have to raise my voice, I shouldn't have to shout. What's it gonna take for your empathy? 'Cause I'm an addict, I have a disease. And it wakes me in the dead of night, I'll be fighting it all my life. It steals my joy and it robs me blind. See, I'm not asking for permission, 'cause I'm holding on to the truth, yeah. I'm letting go of your resistance, and I'm shooting for the moon. So what's it gonna take for you to let me lead? 'Cause I've been singing my song, I have a a dream. 13 years in this 10-year town, I'm ready to sing my song now. 13 years in this 10-year town, I'm ready to sing my song now. 13 years in this 10-year town, I'm ready to sing my song now.
We all need to unmute for this one.
Thank you.
That was great.
Job.
Thank you.
Beautiful. Great job.
Can you be with us at all our Zoom meetings?
Sure. Count me in.
When I invited Rebecca to this, to our talk, I thought to myself, you know, I love to hear about social justice, but there's something about art that speaks right to your heart. I mean, you don't have to convince anybody. So I think it just shows that we can use wherever we are as a starting place. Whether we buy a board book for our 5-year-old, because I know Ibram Kendi has a board book now, Shanna, or, you know, we just talk to our kids or teach or hire someone of color, just give someone a chance, or work in a prison like my brother-in-law. He's teaching high set classes in at the Bristol County House of Corrections. I want to say thank you for being here. I want to say a special thank you to Rebecca and to Gail and Marlene and Shirin, Jordan, Francis, Sarah, and Shanna, and my students who arrived. And I think that what we'll do is I've copied as much as I could on the chat. So be sure to reach out. We've got the websites, we've got emails, and stay in touch, because we're gonna spread the love, and we're gonna shine our lights and do what we can. So I think that's it, right, guys? Okay.